I'm a very popular pastor in my area, and I confess I have sacrificed a lot to be where I am. My wife is gone, my daughter is gone, and now I must sacrifice my manhood too? It all started a few years ago. Back then, I had a small, loving family. My wife Maria was the light of my life. She had a smile that could brighten the darkest day, and a laugh that echoed through our modest home, filling it with warmth and joy. Our daughter Lily was a curious and playful child, always asking questions and exploring the world with wide-eyed wonder. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. However, my church was struggling. Our congregation was small, and the offerings were barely enough to keep the doors open. I preached with all my heart every Sunday, but the pews remained half empty. It was disheartening to see my dreams of a thriving ministry slipping away, but I was determined to turn things around. I wanted to provide a better life for my family and to make a real difference in my community. Then I met Reverend Thomas. He was everything I aspired to be: successful, charismatic, and respected. He drove luxury cars, lived in a mansion, and his church was always packed. His sermons were powerful, and people flocked to him for guidance and blessings. I admired him deeply and longed for him to be my mentor. Despite my earnest pleas, Reverend Thomas initially refused to take me under his wing. But one day, unexpectedly, he summoned me to his office. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness as I sat down in front of him. "So you want to be like me?" he asked with a playful smile. "Yes," I replied, my voice trembling with anticipation. "Okay," he said simply. A few days later, we ended up deep in the forest, far away from civilization. The trees were so tall and thick that they blocked out most of the moonlight, making everything look dark and scary. The air smelled like burning herbs, and it was so strong it made my eyes water. We knelt on the damp ground in front of an old man whose face was hidden by the shadows of his hood. The old man started chanting in a language I didn't understand, and it sounded really eerie. My heart was pounding, and I could feel sweat running down my back. All of a sudden, he stopped and looked straight at me with these piercing eyes. "Your wife or daughter?" he asked, his voice raspy and impatient. I just stared at him, not understanding what he meant. The words hung in the air, and I felt a cold dread settle in. My mentor, Reverend Thomas, knelt next to me, not showing any emotion. "Wife or daughter?" the old man repeated louder and more forcefully. Then it hit me. This was the price for the success I wanted so badly. My mind was racing, and I felt sick to my stomach. I glanced at Reverend Thomas, hoping for some kind of sign or reassurance. He just nodded like this was the only way. "Daughter," I whispered, barely able to get the word out. "Then it shall be so," the old man said like it was a done deal. Reverend Thomas nodded at me again, and I could see a hint of approval in his eyes. The old man continued the ritual, chanting in that strange language. Honestly, I zoned out after that. Everything around me felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. A lot happened that night, but it's all a blur now. All I really remember is the overwhelming guilt and dread that settled in my chest. What had I done? It felt like my soul was sinking into a bottomless pit. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a terrible mistake, one that I could never undo. It was over. The choice was made, and there was no going back. You're watching Midnight Shadows. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's get back to the story. Not long after my daughter fell ill, she died mysteriously. The pain of losing Lily was unbearable. Maria and I were consumed with grief, our hearts shattered by the loss of our precious child. Our home, once filled with laughter and joy, was now a place of sorrow and silence. I would sit in Lily's room holding on to her toys and clothes, tears streaming down my face. But then something changed. Success started pouring in ways I never imagined. My small church, once struggling to survive, began to flourish. More and more people attended my services, and the offerings increased dramatically. In no time, I was able to buy my own building and convert it into a beautiful church. It was a place of worship that I had always dreamed of, complete with stained glass windows and a grand altar. Ever since my encounter with the old man, I felt powerful. There was an aura around me that I couldn't quite explain. I could heal the sick by just blowing on them, and many miracles happened at my hands. People traveled from far and wide to witness these wonders. Soon, other smaller pastors were visiting my church, hoping to learn from me. Some even asked me to be their mentor. Life seemed to be turning around for us. With the newfound wealth, Maria and I began to indulge in luxuries we had never thought possible. We bought elegant clothes, dressing in the finest fabrics. Maria looked stunning in her new dresses, and I took pride in my tailored suits. We enjoyed shopping sprees, laughing and trying on outfits that made us feel like royalty. We traveled the world, exploring places we had only seen in magazines. Each trip brought us closer together, helping us to heal, even if just a little, from the grief that still lingered in our hearts. We dined in the finest restaurants, savoring exquisite meals and toasting to our success with glasses of the best wine. We stayed in luxurious hotels, where every need was catered to and every comfort provided. Despite the pain of our loss, the wealth and success brought moments of happiness and excitement. We threw lavish parties, inviting friends and fellow church members to celebrate with us. Our home, now a grand mansion, was filled with laughter and music once more. We hosted charity events, giving back to the community that had supported us during our darkest times. But amid the joy and luxury, there was an undercurrent of unease. The memory of Lily's death lingered like a shadow over my happiness. My mentor paid me a visit one evening, his presence a stark reminder of the pact I had made. "It's time to invest more," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your investment has weakened." His words sent a chill through me, but I knew what he meant. The power, the success, the wealth, they all came at a cost. And now it seemed it was time to pay again. We went back to the old man in the forest. The ritual was more intense this time, filled with chanting and strange symbols. I felt a sense of dread, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the success that awaited. A few months later, my worst fears came true. I buried my wife, Maria. Her sickness began suddenly, a mysterious illness that no doctor could diagnose. We went from one specialist to another, desperately seeking answers. Maria grew weaker with each passing day, her vibrant spirit fading before my eyes. I spent countless nights at her bedside, holding her hand, praying for a miracle that I knew would never come. The woman who had been my rock, my partner in all things, was slipping away, and there was nothing I could or would do to stop it. The grief was heavy, a crushing weight on my heart. I felt a deep regret, wondering if the choices I had made were worth the terrible price. But even in my darkest moments, success was intoxicating. My congregation came together to support me, showering me with sympathy and love. They brought food, offered prayers, and filled the church with their presence. It seemed like the whole community rallied around me, and for a while it eased my pain. But not everyone was convinced of my piety. Some members of my congregation began to whisper. They questioned the rapid success of the church and the strange, unexplainable events that seemed to follow me. A few even left the church, unable to reconcile their doubts with their faith. Their departure stung, but I remained resolute, clinging to the power and prestige I had gained. Despite my grief, life went on. Soon my bed was always occupied with sisters in Christ, ready and willing to replace my wife. They came offering comfort and companionship, and I welcomed them, hoping to fill the void Maria had left behind. I told myself it was what she would have wanted, that she would not want me to be alone, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. The attention and adoration fed my ego, made me feel powerful and desired. I was truly on top of the world. My church continued to grow and miracles abounded. I healed the sick, cast out demons, and performed wonders that drew crowds from miles around. People looked up to me, sought my guidance, and praised my name. Yet beneath the surface, I felt a gnawing emptiness, a sense of loss that no amount of success could fill. I had more money than I ever thought I could make, but the strange thing was that the money would disappear in no time, and I had to constantly work for it. If, for instance, I was sick one Sunday, something would happen that took a lot of money away, like a close relative being hospitalized or my vehicles getting into accidents. One particularly troubling incident happened when I missed a service due to a severe flu. That very afternoon, my brother called to say our mother had been rushed to the hospital with a sudden, unexplained illness. The medical bills were astronomical and it drained my account overnight. Another time, my car, which was parked securely in my driveway, was found smashed up the next morning with no explanation. Each of these incidents felt like a punishment, a reminder of the unspoken contract I was bound to. Upon asking my mentor, he said, "This is the small price we have to pay for success, total compliance." On top of the sacrifices we made, the spirit we served fed off the energy of our congregants. There was no downtime. We were expected to always work. That was our contract. Despite these strange occurrences, the power I wielded was undeniable. My fame grew, and people traveled from far and wide to witness the miracles at my church. The air during our services was intoxicating, but with great power came great paranoia. I began to see shadows lurking in the corners of my home, hear whispers in the dead of night. Sleep became a rare luxury as my mind constantly churned over the thought of the next sacrifice, the next test of my loyalty. Every knock at my door, every unexpected phone call, sent shivers down my spine. One evening, as I sat in my lavish study surrounded by books and relics of faith, my mentor arrived unannounced. His presence was always both a blessing and a curse. He took a seat across from me, his eyes piercing into mine. "It's time," he said, his voice void of emotion. "For what?" I asked, though I already knew. "For another sacrifice," he replied. As I walked alone through the now familiar forest, I wondered what the old man would ask for this time. "You have to bring me another initiate," he said, his voice rough. His eyes, dark and unforgiving, bore into mine as he spoke through gritted teeth. I thought of the losses I had suffered, the shadows that followed me everywhere, and the countless sleepless nights haunted by nightmares. "No," I said, shaking my head. "There must be something else." The old man's expression hardened. "Yes, there is," he said, his voice cold and stern. He pointed at my pants. "Your manhood or your life." 3 days, the old man said, breaking the silence. His tone left no room for argument. As I stumbled out of the forest, the implication was clear. If I didn't choose, my life would be over in 24 hours. I had already wasted 2 days wallowing in despair, and now the clock was ticking. I wasn't ready to meet my maker just yet, that much was certain. Call me selfish, and you'd be right. My manhood was my life. Ask any man. There was no way I was giving up the simple pleasures of life. I took a deep breath, my mind made up. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Hi, Jack. It's me," I said, forcing a casual tone into my voice. "So, you want to be like me?" I asked with a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Great, meet me tonight," I said, ending the call before he could ask any questions. I spent the rest of the day pacing around my house, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Jack was young and eager, always looking up to me, wanting to follow in my footsteps. The thought of what I was about to do made my stomach churn, but the fear of losing everything, of facing the old man's wrath, was stronger. That evening, I took Jack in the same forest clearing where the rituals always took place. Jack looked at me with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "What's this about?" he asked. "You'll see," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Just trust me." The old man emerged from the shadows, his eyes glinting with a sinister light. "Is this the initiate?" he asked, his voice dripping with satisfaction. I nodded, unable to speak. Jack looked at the old man, then back at me, confusion and fear dawning on his face. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Jack, I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I had no choice." The old man began to chant, and the air grew thick with the smell of burning herbs. Jack tried to back away, but I grabbed his arm, holding him in place. Tears streamed down his face as the realization set in. The ritual continued, the old man's chants growing louder and more intense. Jack's screams echoed through the forest, mingling with the old man's eerie incantations. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had chosen to save myself, but at what cost? When it was over, Jack lay still on the ground, his eyes wide with terror. The old man turned to me, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Your friend should not have resisted the initiation. Still, your time has been increased," he said, his voice filled with dark satisfaction. I looked down at Jack's lifeless body, guilt and horror twisting in my gut. I had sacrificed him to save myself, and the weight of that choice would haunt me forever. As I walked away from the clearing, I couldn't help but wonder, was it all worth it? The power, the fame, the wealth, were they worth the pieces of my soul I had given away? My dear brothers and sisters, as I write this, it is the early hours of Sunday. I have to put on my best performance today, as is expected of me by the God I have chosen to serve. It's like a storm is coming, and I can feel it in my bones that another sacrifice will be asked of me soon. I'm sharing this to let my story be known. I know I do not deserve your pity, and I'm not asking for any. If you were me, what would you do? Any advice is welcome. And that, my dear listeners, concludes today's story. If you have any advice for our guest, please share it in the comments section below. If you have a similar story you'd like to share, you can send it to us at the email on your screen. Until next time, beware of the shadows that linger in the night.